Good morning and welcome to today's webcast, Drive Decision Making with NetSuite Analytics Warehouse. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Our webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
Before we get started, I wanted to share our big news that Moss Adams and Baker Tilly have joined forces to redefine accounting, tax, and advisory services for the middle market. It's really exciting, and you could read more about it on our website via the link in the slide deck and handouts widget. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Casey Fike, Director on the Data Analytics and Generative AI team, and Chris Millet, Director on our NetSuite team. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks for everybody joining today. Casey and I to talk with you a little bit about NetSuite Analytics Warehouse and how it can be used to help you manage your data and drive decision making. Again, I'm Chris Millet, a director on our NetSuite team here at Moss Adams Baker Tilly. I oversee all of our NetSuite solutioning and client engagement activities here. So please feel free to reach out either during the webinar or afterward with any questions that you have for either myself or Casey. So as we jump in here, take you through a quick agenda. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about what is NetSuite Analytics Warehouse. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, we'll give you a quick overview of what it does, what it's best used for, and then we'll start jumping into some of the architecture around the warehouse. For those of you that are a little bit more into the technical elements, Casey will be walking us through how the warehouse is constructed and how it relates to some of the other data sources that you can connect to the warehouse. Then we'll be going through some of the features and functions, various data models that come with the Analytics Warehouse, the pre-built content, and talk a little bit about the pre-built connectors that it comes with. And then we'll go into some use cases. This is really the art of the possible. So talking to you about some of the common use cases that we've seen in terms of working with the clients in our implementations of NSAW, as well as some other use cases that you may be interested in. So as we get going here, we'll give you that overview of NetSuite Analytics Warehouse, or commonly referred to as NSAW. But before we do that, really wanted to talk a little bit about some of the common challenges that Casey and I and our teams hear from clients all the time. So really, any conversation that we ever have around systems, tools that you can use is really about data management, right? So we're all experiencing this world where we have multiple data sources, we're using different systems to do different things. Maybe we're using NetSuite as our ERP, or we're using Shopify for an e-commerce platform, or maybe we have a separate warehouse management system. So what we're seeing time and time again is that folks are dealing with siloed data sources. That's one of the primary challenges that we see. And these sources don't talk to each other. So what we do is we spend a lot of time trying to manage that data and consolidate it so that we can understand what's going on between the different systems. This leads to error and really a time-consuming process where we really are not getting that timely information. Because all these systems are not connected, we cannot consolidate and aggregate that data in a automated way. It leads to really slow and manual processes. And by the time we get to the data, it's outdated, right? The decisions we've needed to make have already passed us, and we are always going to be behind the 8 ball, so to speak, when it actually comes to understanding what our data is telling us in the appropriate decisions. And that really comes down to the third area here is those actual insights. What challenges does that present? Well, it's limited data visualizations. We're using a lot of spreadsheets. We're not able to really democratize the data across our organization so that multiple people can understand what's happening and bring their ideas and insights into how we might be able to make improvements. And really present some hurdles to adoption, right? So if our data is not easy to understand across the organization, then people are just going to stop looking at it, to be quite honest. So what does NSAW do to help solve some of these issues? Well, it really centralizes all the data sources. We'll see this as we go through the presentation. It's built specifically for NetSuite data, but it also has a host of pre-built connectors that you can connect to all kinds of other systems, which Casey will talk about here in a little bit. And it's really designed for rapid analysis of large and multiple data sets. The one nice thing about NSAW, it doesn't really care what the data looks like when it comes in, how it's structured. You can bring it in multiple different structures and then really work with it within NSAW to make it meaningful to your team. One use case that we see it used for quite a bit is when people are migrating over to NetSuite and want to bring over historical data. We get asked all the time, hey, can I bring in my last 10 years of GL detail? Well, NetSuite ERP is really not meant for that. NetSuite ERP is not an analytics warehouse, but NSAW is. So we always make the recommendation, look at NSAW, to use that as your repository for that historical data. And then you can use it to compare to current data or forecast data and build out those models within NSAW. What you'll see is that we have a whole host of pre-built role-based dashboards and subject area content, and really a robust analytical and forecasting engine. So as we've talked about some of the common challenges, we'll talk a little bit about what NSAW is. It is a data warehouse, or a data lake is a common name for it, but it's all cloud-based, and it's really designed for business intelligence. Right? So a lot of people use things like Power BI or Tableau or some of the other tools that you might see that are commonly out there. Well, this does all that as well, but it's actually the repository for your data also. So you can store your data here, and then it also comes with all kinds of pre-built dashboards, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, that are really categorized by process area. So whether you're interested in customer-related information or inventory-related information or revenue management-related information, it has pre-built out-of-the-box visualizations and analytics for each one of those areas, which we'll talk about here in more detail as we move along. But it really includes all of the Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse functionality. It's built in the Oracle Analytics Cloud. It has that direct pipeline to your NetSuite ERP. To connect it to the ERP, it really just takes a handful of clicks and maybe about 30 minutes, and most of that is just watching the system process, and then your data is connected. It does come with a version of Suite Analytics Connect, so we can connect it to other things. And of course, I've talked about the pre-built content as well. So how does NetSuite Analytics Warehouse compare to some of the other analytics tools in the NetSuite portfolio? If you're familiar with NetSuite at all, you're probably used to things like save searches and reports that come out of the box within your existing NetSuite environment. You may even be skilled at modifying those save searches and reports and connecting in those save searches to a couple of different data sets so you can compare data within NetSuite against each other. But save searches and reports within the ERP are really there to be used to run the day-to-day business, right? So you're looking at things like AR aging or AP aging or on-hand inventory or daily transaction activity, those different types of things. Those are really your daily process and operational reports. Obviously, you can get all your key financial statements out of the ERP, have all that real-time drillable data for quick visibility, and then of course can share that data across your organization by emailing it or setting up alerts through reminders and so forth and so on. That's really kind of the beginning portion of it. Very robust, very helpful, can help a lot of folks out with their NetSuite data just at that level. The next level that we'll be looking at is using a tool like Suite Analytics Connect. Suite Analytics Connect is an additional application that you can use to connect your NetSuite data and query it seamlessly with other third-party applications. So if we actually even wanted to connect it to Excel, we could do that and pull your data out of NetSuite to do whatever analytics you wanted to do within that sort of tool. The one limitation there, it is a read-only connection though. So it supports ODBC, JDBC, and .NET, but it is read-only, so you're only able to pull that data out. You cannot really interact with the data in a meaningful way. Okay. Another tool that we're starting to see more and more usage of that's been out for a couple of years now that is built within your NetSuite ERP instance is a Suite Analytics Workbook. So that is really designed to give you that enhanced visibility and usability and improve all those visualizations with things like pivot tables, charts, and graphs. And one of the main differences between a Suite Analytics Workbook and, say, a traditional Save Search is you can do multi-level joining across data sets within your NetSuite environment. Whereas a Save Search, you can only connect a couple of different data sets within a Suite Analytics Workbook. If you wanted to, say, do some analysis between what you have on hand inventory and, say, your fixed asset module, those different types of things, and do some comparative reporting there, you can do that all within one joined data set. The one limitation here, though, is that it's only NetSuite data. So the analytics workbooks are only aware of what NetSuite is aware of, right? So if you have third-party data that you want to do some analysis on in comparison to what's in your NetSuite environment, you won't be able to do that with an analytics workbook because you would need to bring that data into NetSuite. But that's really where NetSuite Analytics Warehouse shines, right? Because one of the key differentiators there is you can consolidate and blend data from multiple external sources. So not just NetSuite ERP, as I mentioned before, if you're using Shopify or another common e-commerce platform, or if you are a SaaS-based company and you're using a third-party system to do usage-based billing, you can bring that data in and compare it to what's going on in your NetSuite environment. If you're using a 3PL to manage your inventory, you can connect to their system and bring in that information in and do analytics against what's going on in your NetSuite environment. So it's really sky's the limit with being able to build out those BI and data warehouse style robust data visualizations within the analytics warehouse. So that's really how the overall analytics portfolio compares. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Casey now to talk to you a little bit about how the architecture is constructed for NSAW. Casey?
Chris, thanks. And thanks everybody for making the time today. It's kind of, as Chris was mentioning, if we get down, I'll try not to get too technical, but I apologize in advance if I do. But you know, when I think about a data warehouse, because I've worked with NSAW and I've worked with kind of building data warehouses from scratch, whether that's a Snowflake, Microsoft SQL, Oracle. I think, you know, a big challenge that I run into with that latter example is, you know, I have to stand up my own software, potentially my own hardware. I have to write a bunch of custom code to pull data from, you know, existing systems, third-party systems. I have to build out that extract, transform, load process, whether that, again, that's maybe a separate tool, which is an additional cost. Maybe that's additional custom code. Not to say it's not manageable, but it just gets very unwieldy. Whereas with NetSuite Analytics Warehouse, all that I mentioned, the data warehouse, the ETL, that's all pre-built within NSAW, right? And so on the left side of the screen here, it's if I start at the bottom, there's that data pipeline. That's that ETL process I was talking about. It's acquiring data from source systems, in this case, NetSuite or potentially a third-party system. That's automatically included within the platform, which is nice. And then if I look at the semantic model and the schema, that's really, Chris was talking about this earlier, but it's joining of tables. How is my customer table related to my sales table? How is, there's unique identifiers. Again, if I were to build this from scratch, I have to write all that custom code, whereas this is already pre-built in NSAW based off of the NetSuite data, the data set, the records that come across. And then that top one is the pre-built visualizations. Again, if I'm building a data warehouse from scratch and I want to visualize my data, maybe that's a Power BI, additional license cost, Tableau, a net new software purchase, in addition to, an annual cost. If I'm thinking about it from a cost and a, level of effort perspective, where I look at NetSuite, it's, to Chris said this earlier, it's a couple of clicking of buttons, and I'm already seeing data in the data warehouse, which personally, that's a huge step just to see data in there. And again, there's work to be done, and I'll kind of talk through how we approach that later. But again, NetSuite has made it very easy to, again, pull data from our NetSuite instance into a centralized store, grab third-party data. I can upload Excel spreadsheets if I'd like. Again, it's very flexible, which personally, that's very nice to see, just because writing custom code and having to manage that really isn't high on my desire list, if you will. And then on the right side of this visual, it's, again, if we need to grab custom records, it gets very easy to do in NetSuite and NetSuite Analytics Warehouse. I can go in, select that record, that comes across within my next data pull. So kind of the way Chris had mentioned this, but just to emphasize, it's, if I want to get, more data driven, if you will, and I kind of want to keep my costs a little bit low and I'm using NetSuite, again, if I look at NSAW, it's like everything's bundled together, which is extremely nice and makes it much easier to manage. So kind of like looking through this, again, we kind of talk through our clients with this on, where are you in your analytics journey? Or do we already have a third-party tool we're building visualizations? Are we struggling with grabbing an Excel file from here, or Safe Search from NetSuite, trying to push those together? But we really like to take a step-by-step approach depending on where our clients are, and NSAW makes this very easy, where it's, Chris had mentioned this earlier, if maybe we're on QuickBooks, we're looking to go to NetSuite, we have historical information in QuickBooks, I want to get a view of what are our sales for the past 5 years. I'm not going to pull that, that QuickBooks data into NetSuite. I can get that into NSAW. And then what I can do is kind of, again, join that historical data in NSAW to the new data that's coming through my NetSuite instance. I can get that historical look, again, all in one platform. And some other kind of different approaches here that we kind of step through, where it's, pulling data from multiple systems, right? Again, taking a very small bites of the apple, if you will, where like, let's start with NetSuite, some historical information. We might be an online retailer. So we have a Shopify sales platform. I want to grab data from there. That's an API connection in NSAW. And then we can set up a schedule where it's like, I'm grabbing that once an hour, once a day. Again, that's flexible, which also is nice, just because I can schedule those jobs. I don't have to do any sort of like custom coding or set up any other tools to pull that across. And again, that data flow is coming in. And if I think about this from like a data governance perspective, it's my data pulls, my data store, it's all automated. So I'm reducing the amount of manual intervention with this. So I have my level of confidence knowing that as that data is coming across and nobody's manipulating it, I have pretty good confidence that that data is complete and accurate. I'll just go ahead and pull up both here. So on the left side of the screen, this is your kind of historical transact SQL. This is the code that I was talking about, right? Where maybe I'm an analyst, a business analyst. Maybe I don't know how to write custom SQL code. Again, if I look at on the right side of the screen, that's kind of what we're looking at within NSAW, where, historically, if I was kind of, having to build this from scratch in SQL or Snowflake, I'm having to write all this custom code to come across to like, here's the data fields I want to grab, having to manage that code. Whereas in NSAW, it's a lot simpler, where it's like a click and drag that I can pull across, account ID and then revenue for that account, or customer and revenue. It's a simple click and drag to pull across onto a canvas, then I can immediately start visualizing my data. And I can build visualizations off of that. And again, the scheduling, where if I want that to come in once a day, once an hour, very flexible, again, depending on my use case for the different reports and the data I'm using, has been very nice to kind of get a feel for, rather than going kind of the archaic method and writing code and having to manage. And Chris, with that said, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thanks, Casey. So as we've gone through some of the architecture of NSAW, we want to emphasize a few of the features and functions. I know we've talked about some of this already, so I won't spend too much time here. But as Casey mentioned, NSAW is a combination of data warehouse plus using that semantics, usability from a user interface standpoint, and then, of course, providing that analytics content. So it's got the analytics content and user experience will involve that unified consumption, right? So it really refers to the ability to consolidate and access data from multiple sources in a centralized location, right? Analytics Warehouse also uses ML-driven insight, which is really that machine learning algorithms to automatically detect patterns, trends, or anomalies in your data. It can really give you that predictive analysis and anomaly detection that you might not pick up right away just with your own eyes, right? We've talked about some of the package visualizations, which we'll touch on a little bit more here on the next slide. Some of those out-of-the-box dashboards and visualizations. And then some of those are going to be leveraged within best practice subject areas. So Casey will talk a little bit more about some of the data sets that really come out of the box. And he just referred to that semantic model, which allows you to interact with your data, more of a drag and drop interface without having to know SQL programming and those different types of things. Everything within the analytics foundation is built in what's called a star schema. So it's really going to be a combination of fact tables and dimensional tables, right? And so those are really going to be at the center of the modeling approach that you're going to use within the data warehouse. And you're going to organize all of the dimensional tables off of those fact tables. And then, of course, the data pipeline, right? So that's coming in from your different sources, whether that be NetSuite or some other third-party source that will bring data in from. Just quickly, again, just circling back on some of the out-of-the-box visualizations, there really is a rich set, as Casey alluded to, rich set of visualizations available, right? So that's one of the advantages of NSAW versus another data warehouse, is in most other data warehouses, you're having to build all of this from scratch, right? So it's going to be take a lot longer to get it implemented than it will be with NSAW. They're all grouped into functional areas. So as I mentioned before, whether you're looking for customer-related data or item-related data, or from a CRM perspective, opportunity-related data, pipeline data, margin data, it's all grouped into those specific functional areas. But you can really leverage those metrics across pillars, really, to perform those rapid root cause analytics that we're all trying to get at. And again, from advanced reporting, kind of going back to that stair-step idea, we've got NetSuite that flows into your analytics warehouse. That's going to be available to you instantaneously, really, to start visualizing your data across those platforms, and then of course start incorporating some of the other data that you might want to do comparisons with your NetSuite data. So Casey, I'll turn it over to you to kind of talk about some of the data models that we get out of the box here.
Yeah, so kind of looking at these, and I know we're running a little bit short on time, but I'll kind of just talk through them. But I kind of look at these where there's a lot of, again, the records that are coming from that were generated within NetSuite, what I'll call NetSuite proper. This information is all coming directly out of NetSuite, which again, I think about the level of work it would take for me to do this in a standalone, like in a Microsoft SQL Server, and having to write all these and pull these into the fact and dimension tables that you mentioned. NetSuite, NSAW, it's done a great job of just kind of pulling, here's, NetSuite listen to the customers, here's what we want to see. Here's at least a starting point, right? Where it's, again, if I look at a lot of these that come across, it's a matter of, can I customize these in NSAW for, the top 10 sold? I want to see top 5. I want to see top 20. Again, customizable in NetSuite, but again, a lot of this pre-built stuff is nice to just get the creative juices flowing. Again, as I think about data warehousing and data, it's a heavy lift to stand up your own data warehouse and then maintain your own data warehouse, just because things break, jobs fail. Okay, I have to allocate a resource to go fix that. Whereas I kind of look at NSAW as just a part of the greater NetSuite ecosystem where, my security, everything's managed in there. I can talk, I can limit access to visualizations, again, for sales. Maybe I don't want my finance team having access to that. Okay, I can put that in a folder in NSAW, limit access. So again, it's very kind of, the thought process from the NetSuite side I've been pleasantly surprised on just like what we can get from NetSuite. Some of these connectors, Chris was talking about these earlier, there's a ton of connectors, again, available in NetSuite. Some of these are pre-built, but then there's also the flexibility where I might be using a tool. This is something that we've done. I've been using a third-party tool that's not listed in here. And there's API connectors where I can, do a little bit of coding and pull that data across. So again, I think about, the biggest pains as I think through data warehousing outside of standing it up, it's pulling multiple data sources across, where historically I had to write custom code if I wanted to connect to an Amazon Redshift instance. Again, that takes time to manage that code, whereas NetSuite, NSAW has a pre-built Redshift connector, which is super nice. I get credentials for that Redshift instance. Those go into NSAW. I set up the schedule. That data starts coming across. Another big one that I don't see listed in here, but we do work with quite a bit, is Excel. Again, ideally we want to get out of Excel, but that's a big lift. But we can upload Excel workbooks and then develop data flows within NSAW to pull that Excel data and then join it to existing tables, right? So again, this is something that we're working with quite a bit. So again, I know we just have a couple minutes, but a couple looks at what the endpoint here, where I was talking about the data visualization, that things that we can build in NetSuite. Again, talked about this. There's a number of pre-built visualizations that come standard with NSAW. They're already connected to those records that come across. So once we flip that switch and we're connected, we're already able to see information, which again, that's a big light at the end of the tunnel for me, just as I'm doing these data warehouse projects, just because it's, again, I think about pre-NSAW and just how difficult that was to fix API issues or security issues or data refresh issues, whereas clicking a few buttons in NetSuite and that data starts coming across, and I can then, maybe I need to adjust some of the records or filter, whatever that may be, but I'm able to see this. So again, a couple of screenshots here, but just, a look here, and I was talking about this earlier, where, it's NSAW has the full package from like data acquisition, data storage, and data visualization, where I can have, bar charts, line charts. There's a ton of charts here that we can look at. If I just want a solid, just a look at text on here's our dollar amount of sales for the past quarter. And then over on the top line, just under the black bar, I can apply filters to that page. So, let's say I want to look at 25 and then I want to look at 24. As opposed to having to reload this data visualization, I can just click that filter. My data is automatically filtered, so that 24 data is coming across, whereas I was, maybe I'd go to the latest year, which is 2025, to get that look. And then kind of the last piece here is just, again, there's a number of different visualizations. Again, there's a ton in there within NSAW that, we can select from. And again, the pre-builts, but again, very flexible. And again, we kind of look at, the data on the left side and here. And again, I know we're running very short on time, as I keep saying, and I apologize, but that click and drag approach, I'm a little biased. Coding's my background, but if I think about the larger user base, they're probably not sitting where I am, where they write SQL code all day. That click and drag has been very nice, I think, just to get people upskilled and get people more comfortable with their data and not be intimidated and having to go learn SQL or transact SQL. So I know we're right at time. Apologies for running a little bit late, but really appreciate everybody joining today. And with that said, back to you, Emily.
All right. Thank you, Casey, and thank you, Chris, for a great presentation today. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we'll do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Here is a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. Please also visit mossadams.com for future webcasts and other resources to help elevate your performance. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time.